Speaking of Mowgli, speaking of guys that are looking to become the next big thing in the NBA, the next big dogs of the NBA. In terms of players, who do we think are a couple of guys that are on the verge now this year of breaking into that echelon of top 10, top 15 player in the league?
So I'll start by just naming the candidates. I mean, I went through and really thought about guys who are on the edge of all NBA. So what we know, what we can say objectively is that top 15 according to all NBA is Giannis, Tatum, Embiid, Shea, Butler, Jaylen Brown, Jokic, Mitchell, Steph, Julius Randle, LeBron, Sabonis, Fox, and Lillard. And fun little thing there is when's the last time the Kings had two all NBA players on the same roster at the same time? That's
Never.
interesting. Never, yeah. And starting off our list of candidates is recently former King Halliburton,
Mm-hmm.
Edwards, Mikal Bridges, Zion is he gonna be healthy, Markkanen, LaMelo Ball, Jaren Jackson Jr. These are guys that I'm thinking about of like which of these guys could make exact. I think that they have a lot of room for growth from fringe star player or star player to superstar player. Do you have any names besides that? Did I miss anybody?
Yeah, I got Jalen Brunson on my list. Trae Young as
Jalen
well.
Brunson. Okay. Trey. So okay, I had Trey Young there and Jalen Brown. I think my two things with them were why I didn't consider them as candidates. I felt that there wasn't enough room for them to grow in the places that they needed to grow the most. Trey Young defensively, he's never going to get there, and I want him to get better to where the point he was 2 years ago. And I think that's a top 20 player. I think that's right outside the top 15. Um, but possibly, I mean, I guess he can get back to it. Does that count if he gets back to it? I think he was in, did he make an All NBA team?
Did yeah,
He was an
yeah,
All-Star? Yeah, he did. So, I mean, at one point in time, he was definitely top 15. So, I mean, that's fair. Well, I'll end it there. And he could get back to his level and he could definitely be a top
he
15 player.
buys in and starts to succeed with Quinn Snyder. I think you definitely start to think of him as a guy who's right
Yeah.
there, even if he's not like cemented there. He's definitely the kind of guy where when you get to like the likes of like a Julius Randle or like a Donovan Mitchell or something, they're the kind of guys that can be interchangeable as the season goes on. He at least gets to that sort of level.
What does Jalen Brunson need to do?
I think it's more of a sustaining it from him because he's taken big jumps over the
Yeah.
last 3 years. If he sustains the level that he delivered last year, and everyone is definitely convinced then that it really is him making that difference for the Knicks, and it's not all about Julius Randle, I think that's where you start to think of him as being one of the best point guards and even one of the best guards in the league. Like stats wise, he was doing it last year. They were winning games. They do it again this year. He was 24-6 last year on 52, 42, 83 splits. He does something like that again, like he's 25-7 and he's doing like 50, 50, 40, 80 again on the splits and the Knicks are a winning team again. I don't see
Mm-hmm.
how you can't think of him as being in that echelon and in that sort of range.
Does he need to do more playmaking? Does he need to be more of a pure point to like jump into that?
I'd
Because
say
he,
there's
he
there's an
definitely made
element
that
of
jump a
it
little bit.
because it's like him and Randall are kind of doing the same thing and they're kind of taking turns of who's going to be the guy that scores the ball tonight. I think there is an element of that. I think if he adds that extra bit more, but I think his inside scoring and the scoring as a whole is the major part of his game, so you don't want him to lose that either. I think it's finding the balance and maybe just even finding a way to highlight it more without kind of resorting to not taking the shots that he takes because he takes very efficient shots and scores them well.
I'm Yeah, you know what? I'm fine with that. I think he's definitely in this list. He's a little bit older in this list, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. He's kind of like
He's
the
that
almost
that's
veteran
the one
type
thing where I was like,
player in
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. He's had a really interesting trajectory of being like solid role player, solid starter, really good starter. Then now he's a star in New York after he got traded, and that I guess that changes things. There's the stigma around how slowly he's gotten to this point. And I think maybe, you see a guy, not to compare him to Jimmy Butler at all, but a guy like Jimmy Butler, where it took a minute for people to kind of recognize that, okay, this guy is he's a top 10 player, top 12 player. Um, but for the young guys, well, where do we kind of rank them? I mean, I think I'll start by saying that the people that I'm most confident in is Anthony Edwards,
Hmm.
and the big question mark that we won't even get into is Zion. If Zion's healthy, I mean, I'll put him there.
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
definitely put him there. But Anthony Edwards, I think we've discussed him enough. I think
Yeah, yeah. We
that's an
know
obvious
he's
one,
the
right?
number one. Yeah, we don't have to
Yeah,
discuss that. We know he's the guy that's right there, ready to make that leap, and most
and
likely to do it as well.
yeah, and Halliburton too. I mean, just off of the playmaking, I think he's kind of a little bit below there. Um, I think the interesting one for me, who's I guess maybe in a somewhat similar position as Jalen Brunson, being in a new team, being a little bit older, um, and maybe being a little bit limited. Like I think that Edwards, for example, could do everything. I mean, I think he could become a superstar in so many different ways. Halliburton too, but Mikal Bridges,
Hmm.
a guy who's like we were thinking maybe he could win Defensive Player of the Year type of deal. Um, he's a guy that's averaged 26 points, made 38% of his threes on almost 7 attempts with the Nets. I mean, numbers like that while being a first team defense, what does that do for you in terms of being a top 15 player? Is that Jimmy Butler-esque? Like you're a defensive stopper and you're an offensive weapon. You're a top offensively, you're like a top 20 player, but defensively you're a top 10 player. Does that automatic? I mean, by numbers, doesn't that put you right there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think we have to see if Bridges can be that guy for an entire season now, and like can he have some sort of impact in winning? Because don't get me wrong, the Nets roster as a whole is just a mess. So it's going to be very difficult for him to have a real positive impact on winning. But that's kind of the thing that will hold them back. Yeah, like they're likely going to be around the play-in sort of mark, and that might hinder him a little bit. But in terms of the level of defense that he can produce, like you can be 100% confident in having him guarding the opposing team's best player. He can guard multiple positions, and then he can be that knockdown 3-point shooter, the guy who's delivering on the offensive end as well. It's a huge difference maker because you always think so often that it's the offense that comes first, and then they're like, okay, so is this guy even capable of playing on the defensive end? Similar to like a Trey Young type of player, or even like a guy like Anthony Edwards, where you're seeing glimpses of it. It's like now can he really bring this as a consistent part of his game? But Bridges has gone the other way because he was in the situation he was in Phoenix. Defense and 3-point shooting was what was key for him to be a good role player in that team. But now he's been given the keys almost, saying, right, you go out and do your thing on both ends of the floor, and he's getting put in that position, and so far he's delivering on it. And the fact that the defense is always going to be there, now it's just a question of if he sustains that offensive level, sustains that impact, then you have to have him in the conversation 100%. Just the level of the team he's on might just hinder him that bit.
Yeah, the guy, it's fascinating to see the guy he's become
Mm-hmm.
just instantly once your mentality changes, not being behind Chris Paul, not being behind um, Booker, not being behind Aiton. I mean, he's really the fourth option there. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're wondering like, oh well, why isn't he putting the ball on the floor more? Why isn't he taking more shots? Why isn't he like he's because that's not by design. And then to see him flourish like this, I mean, it's really fascinating to think about what he would have been for the Suns and what the Suns would have done if he had the mentality there, been given a little bit more free reign. Because I think this is a great experimental period with the Nets, even though that it's going to hold them back. The Nets aren't going to be successful in terms of going far in the playoffs, but they have depth and they don't have a go-to guy. Mikal Bridges is that go-to guy. He gets to experiment and be like, all right, how far can he take this offensive thing? How efficient can he go if you're giving him 12, 13, 14, 15 shots a game? Like how good is his team going to be if he does that? And I think I mean, so far, I mean, the efficiency he's had, uh, albeit only a quarter of the season. I mean, it's impressive. I have another interesting one. Lauri Markkinen.
Yes, he's got a
Lauri
he's a
Markkinen.
big this is a big year for Larry Marklin.
That's a consistency thing too. You,
Mm-hmm.
you talk about Jalen Brunson going to a new team, proving that with more touches, that guy's a star. Markkinen doing the same thing in Utah. Um, and this is a guy that just, he basically had a full season of what he would have for like 1 month every season with the Bulls. Um, and he's on full display. He's a wing. He's a power forward. He's a center. You don't know what he is, but he can shoot. He can attack closeouts. You can play a little defense now. I mean, it's funny, the little experiment that he had with the Cavs really unlocked him in a very interesting way. Um, he did it a little bit in Chicago, and it was just such a weird experiment. He wasn't ready for that as a young player, but now switching on to wings, using his length to contest shots and recover, and using his athleticism there, like he's really blossomed as an athlete. I think. I mean, his he's in his physical prime, and with his size, I'm a 7'1" shooter, 7'1" wing, who's playing multiple positions. I mean, I don't see why he can't jump into that. But what is it? What's the major thing holding him back? I think it's defense. If he can take another step defensively, maybe. But
Yeah, the defense is the thing that's going to be holding them back, and obviously the Utah Jazz aren't a team that's going to really be winning too many games this year. But in terms of him as a player and the size and versatility he has, and I think this year, if he can deliver on that again, he'll be looking over at Karl Anthony Towns and he'll be thinking to himself, "Ooh, maybe I'm the best big man shooter there is in the NBA." Like he can get to
yeah,
that sort of level. He's got the talent and the versatility he has on both ends. The defense just take that another little step. I don't think he's ever going to be an all defensive type of guy, but there's definitely another level that he can get to where it's something that you don't think of and you just think of the offense and how much he's delivering on the offensive end because he's just doing fine and he's not a target as a defender. So I think he could get to that level, but even if he's at that level he was last year as a defender and he sustains what he did as an offensive threat, that changes it in a really big way for me. And I think he's a guy that just with the size that he has, everyone will be looking at him and thinking like this is a guy that can really be a difference maker for a number of teams or the lead guy to lead this next generation of the Jazz.
yeah. And I don't think he got enough. He got enough highlight last year. I mean, it was obviously the stats. It's obviously some of the dunks he had, some of the couple of game winners he had. People realizing, okay, he's actually a good player. But you look at the tools he has when you watch him play. Um, and there's not a lot of top 15 guys who has that toolbox. I mean, obviously the shooting, and then at his size, the ability to grab a rebound, go coast to coast, in the same way that you see from Giannis, from Tatum, from Randall, um, the ability to defend 3 through 5, even though maybe not at an elite level. I mean, just the versatility there to do it is a skill in and of itself. Not a lot of players on this list doing that. Um, and just again the size that he has too. Well, what he can continue to grow with that, playing in the post a bit more. I I don't know who's going to jump off of this list, but it'll come down to team success, and I'm interested to see as he grows. Same with Brunson, guys who've been given chance with another team, Kale, Brunson, Markkinen. What about a younger guy? Oh, I want to test the waters with LaMelo Ball.
I'll just say quickly before I say that I'm loving how you're saying all that stuff about marketing with that little smile. I like how happy it's making you see him
I'm
deliver.
happy. I'm happy to see him do well there. I think it's it's unfortunate the choices the Bulls made to not necessarily to trade him, but the choices they made in terms of roster construction. Because I think I was thinking back on some what ifs, and if a healthy Zach Levine and Lowry Markkinen are on the same team, that and Wendell Carter's still there. I mean, that these are guys who maybe they developed in other places because they're there. But you got to imagine there is a possibility that you set up the right development plan for them and the team that they're already on, and they figure that out like that. But that team would be fantastic. So unfortunate, but I'm happy he's happy there.
Okay, and
But
then
yeah,
LaMelo Ball. Another really interesting young player.
I'm gonna say
And
no.
the big thing is obviously the uh the team that he plays on, the Charlotte Hornets. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the East. again, they're just such a nothing franchise. They like the Charlotte. You just think Charlotte, you just think of losing. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. He's in the position where he is being tasked with changing that, and he had some injuries last year, but in terms of playmaking, 3-point shooting, it's down. Now it's just a consistent scoring, commitment on the defensive end, and really trying to turn the needle, turn the screw just that little bit to get them up and closer to the play-in rather than being closer to being a lottery team. Because that's like with the roster they currently have, that's the kind of almost the best you can hope for from them.
Yeah, I guess the team success definitely holds him back, and I wonder how. I mean, from a maturity standpoint, like where is he at? Is he leading this team? I don't think he's there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's there yet. And I'm making a lot of assumptions on that, and I mean that's just based on what we've seen, but I'm not super confident that jump's going to happen this year. Maybe next year. Well, we just have to see a full year of that happening. Um,
Yeah. I think that's fair, but I think he's kind of he's the big question mark that you see. Like after he won Rookie of the Year, after he did the things that we all expected from him coming out of Australia, and even surprised to see like with his shooting, that was a big question mark about him. So it's going to be interesting to see, can he do that consistently? Can he be the guy that turns things around for the Charlotte Hornets? Because think of Charlotte, think of them as being the Bobcats, as the Hornets. All you think about is losing, and nobody ever even coming close to really turning them into a team that's in the playoffs year on year, and having winning seasons year on year. But he's definitely kind of that outside one where he'll always be talked about in that realm, but whether he actually can achieve it, especially this year, I don't really see that
yeah.
being too likely.
And I'll say one positive thing about it. I mean, just to put it simply, like talent wise, um, I think he's a better player than Halliburton. I think he's um, I think on a similar level to Edwards, just in level of sheer talent, not physicality, but has a lot of similar tools to Halliburton, but I think has more potential as a defender and a little bit more versatility as an off-ball player, as a slasher. And I mean, a guy with that talent, I mean, he has a potential to it, but yeah, the system there, unless things could drastically change, I mean, this could be a very different conversation a few months from now. But yeah, I'm not seeing it yet. But his name is there because of that reason, because that talent level is there, because he's so young, and because we're not privy to how things change in the offseason. We're not privy to their mentality. You know, that's things we learn later on. So maybe we learn a big thing changes. But I want to get on to the last name I have here. And I'd say he, along with Mikhail, I have them in like my top three. I'd say I'd go like Edwards, Halliburton, Mikhail, and then Jaren Jackson Jr. And the reason I say Jaren Jackson Jr. is because of the opportunity he's going to have. We talked about Desmond Bane having a little bit more with Ja being out, but Jaren Jackson Jr. hasn't fully had the reins, and I believe he will. And this could be a quick experiment of, what can he do with the ball in his hands a bit more. But I think in terms of potential, like that has always been a tool that he has not fully taken advantage of. And he hasn't taken advantage of it because, you have Dylan Brooks, you have Ja, Tyus Jones, you even have Desmond Bane. Like, you have all these guys who have the ball in their hands. So for him to attack mismatches on the perimeter, for him to face up and put the ball on the floor, I mean, he's got the ability to do it, and we've seen it in the playoffs last year too. Like there's been some times where, he gets the ball and then he's in the triple threat position. He's making some moves. He's making drop steps. He's taking Euro steps. He's spinning into shots, and it's stuff that you don't see all the time in the regular season until he has a chance to do it. And he's a guy that, if he does that, well, what's the suspension again? I don't even remember. John Morant's out
20,
for
20 25 games.
25 games. Yeah. I mean, that's enough opportunity, I think, especially with having a Team USA experience, having a little bit more of that I'm interested to see if he takes that next jump, not just a best defender of the NBA jump, but also an offensive weapon.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, like we know he has the defense. He's the reigning defensive player of the year. Absolute machine, block, protecting the rim. But like, remember in his early days when obviously he was obviously injured a lot in the kind of his early years, and they were looking at him as a guy who can space the floor and do a bit more like that. It's a question of how much he wants it, how much of an opportunity he's going to get. You have to believe that there's going to be opportunities there for him. And where can he go from here? Where would be kind of the main areas? Would you want to see him more as a guy who can space the floor that bit more, or you just want to see the ball in his hands in the post a bit more?
Yeah, the spacing the floor is fine. He's continued to get better there. And I think he'll continue to improve. But my thing is going from just a catch and shoot on the perimeter to a catch, maybe if he's posting up a smaller guy. A lot of teams are going to want to put smaller guys on Jaren Jackson. Um, Post them up. He's shown that he's developed as a post player, but also his face up game, because he can put the ball on the floor. He can get to a spin move. He can get to a drop step. He can get to a euro. I mean, I think that's where he can flourish, because he does have some skill with the ball. Not enough, obviously, to be initiating on the perimeter, but I think enough to have to be a go-to option in the mid post, to be a go-to option if he's facing up there. And I think that's what I mean. I think that would vault him into being a defensive player of the year guy who is scoring 24, 25 a game if at his peak. But we just need to see it a little bit more. And I think he has potential for that.
Yeah, and I think that like a move like that is something that changes the kind of round for the Grizzlies as well, and it's not so
Exactly.
hyped on
Exactly.
Ja and Desmond Bain. When you don't think of Jaren Jackson Jr. just as being that defensive stopper, then you're kind of like, how can a team really stop this team if Ja and Bain are at 100%, and you got Jaren Jackson Jr. as this unbelievable defender, but also this serious offensive weapon? That's like that's a team that can challenge the Denver Nuggets for sure if it can get to that level.
Yeah,
Let's
that gets me excited. Sorry, I need to
yeah,
indulge in that
on,
thought
on those Grizzlies, yeah.
because that is, you always look at across the league, like where's the growth going to come from, and it's obvious to look at the Suns and look at the stuff that they got, look at their shiny new toys. But a guy like Jaren Jackson, when you can grow a player like that, if he goes, like you said, from not just being a defensive stopper, but becoming an offensive weapon, like a serious offensive weapon like that, the Grizzlies, then they that's something they need to invest in, because that's their future. That's their future, is Ja being a superstar and Jaren Jackson Jr. being a two-way star, like an emphasis on two-way. So that, I mean, that gets me excited, man. It's possible. I think it's in the cards. It's there.
Just to finish out, then make a call. Then okay, we'll say maybe we both feel it's Anthony Edwards, but out of this list of players, who do you think is most likely to make All NBA next season?
So officially, you got to call it. I'm gonna I'm gonna end it there. I think, who do I believe in to make the jump we talked about the most? I think I want to say I really want to say it's Mikal Bridges. I think that offense is gonna stay there. Um, and that I think that the Nets will be in the play-in probably with that contribution, with their depth. I'm picking Mikal.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm actually tempted to go for Jaren Jackson
I
Jr.
know.
But
It almost
I
did.
think I'll say I think I'll go Halliburton. I think I
Yeah.
believe we're gonna see a growth from the Indiana Pacers, and he's a guy that can definitely average like 23 points and 10 assists a game while shooting 40% from three. So I think he's a guy for me that will definitely be in the conversation around All NBA next year.